Channel 4's teletext service 4Tel offers you more from 4. All that's new on 4, including Channel 4's early morning television service, the Channel 4 Daily. A guide to all your favourite sport on 4 with up-to-the-minute results. There's background information on Channel 4's wide variety of arts and music programmes, plus news, reviews and listings of all the films on 4. So if you have a teletext set, call up the index on page 410 and get more from 4 with 4Tel.
Hello, I'm Carl Attrell, and you're listening to Teletext People. Teletext People is a social record of people that have been involved in either the production or the restoration or the artwork of the blocky medium that once dominated our TV screens in Great Britain before 2012. In the series, you will hear from the pioneers, the people who made it tick, and also people who have only recently visited the teletext medium but are in their own way keeping it alive for the preservation for others in the future. In this episode, we speak to Dan Farrimond, a digital retro artist. And I started by asking Dan what teletext actually meant to him.
Well, I think it's always been there in my life from a very young age. So it's a case of familiarity with me. And it's an ever-present force, I guess, in my life from when I was a little kid. I always saw teletext as this futuristic thing. And I still have that opinion. I still have that idea in my head that it's from the future. And every time I see it, it always seems so sci-fi movie from the future to me. But yeah, I always knew about it as a kid because my granddad had it on his gigantic telly at his house. And we would play bamboozle together. Although I was really bad at it, he would mostly answer the questions. And shortly after, I think we got a family teletext TV set. So we would use that mainly for the news and football scores. So why teletext? I don't know. It, like I said, it's just something that was there, you know? Something that was an instrumental part of my early life.
So at what point did teletext cross over into creating artworks yourself?
Well, I'd like to say that I submitted some artworks for Frame It, or the CFAX equivalent of that. You know, where you could draw a teletext page and send it in. But sadly, I didn't do that. My brother did. We've got a photograph of him standing in front of the TV with his thumbs up, which is really good. But I'm sad to say I didn't do that. I guess you could call my contributions to the magazine, my letters that I would write to teletext, art. They're the kind of creative, but also a little bit crazy. For example, one of my contributions to the zine was 10 things you can do with a walking stick. And then there were all these different things you could do with a walking stick, like play snooker, play golf, and then number 10 right at the end, walk with it.
Oh, so the magazine, was that, what service was that on? Was that on Channel 4?
Yeah, I believe it was definitely on Channel 4 when I submitted to it, on Teletext Limited. And then later on, it transitioned to digital teletext. It was on that for a couple of years, I remember, because I sent a message, email by that point actually, something like, "Hello, you lots probably won't remember me from back in the day, but I am back." And then nobody ever read it. So by that time, magazine, you could write an email and it would be on the next day. The heyday of the zine had long since passed, And back then, you had to wait 2 weeks for your letter to be published.
So from the heady days of using teletext, you've become an exponent of TeletextR, actually making it for the community. So how did that start? How did you first discover that you could make teletext on a computer and share it with other people?
I think it would have been about 2005, 2006 when I was doing my university degree course, which was multimedia arts, and I was struggling to think of something to do my dissertation on. So I got back to my student flat and I was thinking, what in the world can I do it about? I don't know. I'm going to have to go on teletext here while I think, because I would do that sometimes. You know, you needed something on in the background, so I would put the sports scores on or whatever. And then it occurred to me, aha, I've got to do my project about teletext. Because I thought back to my early days browsing Digitizer and the magazine and all those wonderful artworks created by Paul Rose in the 90s, and remembered that you could use teletext to create art. And this sparked something off. The one thing I think that was the glue in my whole university career, as it was teletext, because I was doing all these other crazy things like little animations and stuff with Flash, interactive things for the web. But all the time I was looking into teletext and teletext art. And you can actually still find my dissertation online somewhere. But probably not a good idea to look that up because it's probably very embarrassing. However, it is there if anybody wants to use it as a source for anything. But I think the most important thing about that was I learned about how teletext can be used for art and how artists were sort of on the cusp of turning it into a more serious art form. And I think that inspired me to try and champion it a bit more. And we've got to this point today where I'm taking it more seriously than ever, I think. One of the things that I wanted to do eventually was get teletext in a textbook, an art textbook of some sort. And that endeavor is still ongoing, but one day we will do it. But yeah, back then, I found something called the ZebraText teletext editor, and I experimented with that because there was a project called Electrolab, was it called Microtel? In the Netherlands.
Yes.
And that was for the Rotterdam Film Festival. Is Rotterdam the Netherlands? It is, isn't it? It's for the Rotterdam Film Festival, 2005, I think it was. They invited people to create their own teletext artworks with this program. And I was a little bit too late for that, but I managed to do some experimentation. And that was a lot of fun. I found it... The most important thing is that it was a lot of fun.
Yes, and that's where I found that I could make teletext, was on that page. It was like a legacy page long after the festival, but the ZebraText editor was still available for a download there, so that's where I started playing with it. Were there any other artists about that sort of inspired you for the work that you were going to be making?
That's a very good question. I'm trying to think which artists I named in that dissertation. I'm pretty sure I must have named Raquel Myers in that. There was one... They were all contributors to the Electrolab project, if I remember. And one of them was named Carola Unterberger Probst. Some more strange influences, like GIF Model, at GIF Model on Twitter. Dragan Espenscheid was one of them. I liked his little artworks that he made for that project. And a few other people like Maki Ueda. He did a project in around 2000 for a European service. I think it might have been a 25 or a 35 frame animation that told a little story. And I remember being quite inspired by that you could do something like that.
Actually sort of like tell a whole story just through graphics and text.
Yeah, rather than just one static page. I couldn't do that myself at that point, but I remember being really impressed that they'd actually pulled off a sort of really slow teletext animation.
So, with all the teletext experience that you were gaining through your artworks for your dissertations, did you then get the sort of motivation to share your teletext artwork with the wider world?
Yeah, I did post those early experiments online as soon as I made them, but I don't think I actually had anything constructive to work towards with it, really, because I sort of dropped teletext art until 2012, I think early 2012, when I saw a call out for something they were calling the International Teletext Art Festival, which is actually a decade old this year. And that would have been around about the time when I started taking it seriously, because I was still experimenting in my artworks that I sent, but they had more of a purpose because they were going to be shown on real teletext, which is, I think, it's still a great motivation for me, and it definitely was back then. So I submitted about 10 pages and was very surprised when they showed them all. I thought they would pick one or two, but they showed all my... I made a load of dodgy meme-based pages like Trollface, which was a lot more popular back then, linking it to the digital switchover. So I was sort of memeing, and I don't know if I would do that sort of thing now. But yeah, I was sort of trying to bring the web and memes to teletext a little bit. So that little bit of the web, a bit of a crossover with the web, as it were.
And what TV station were they shown on?
So that was shown on Odd Text, I think. Well, it was certainly shown on YLE Text, because I was looking that up earlier today. And possibly Swiss Text in Switzerland, and quite probably Germany as well, because those early teletext art festivals were shown across multiple services across Europe.
Just a reminder that if you're listening to this on your favourite podcast app, you can also find this on the YouTube channel. And if you are watching on YouTube, you can find us on your favourite podcasting app. You can find out ways that you can help with the show in the show notes. I first met you at the Tate Britain, was it? In London, where you were doing the Late at Tate exhibition. So what was that about?
You know something? I was very nearly late to the Tate block party that you're talking about, because I got on the wrong train, and it's only through a very kind train conductor that I managed to get there on time. And if that didn't happen, the whole world of teletext art could have collapsed in upon itself. A kind train conductor said, "Oh, you need to change at crew, mate." If I'd have stayed on that train, I would have been half an hour late. And, you know, the butterfly effect, we wouldn't have been sitting here today, Carl. I wouldn't have been talking to you right now. But no, yeah, it was a very memorable day. I think about it all of the time. The teletext block party in 2015 at Tate Britain. All the people that turned up to it, that were all so enthusiastic about teletext and learning about it. That was a real influence and an inspiration, I believe, that event.
So, were you approached to host that by the Tate Britain, or how did that come about?
Yeah, I was approached, and I believe they found my work on Tumblr, because at that time I was posting a mixture of my own work and some of Jason Robertson's teletext captures from the 80s and the 90s, and they found this blog and asked me if I would come and give a presentation along with about 3 or 4 other people who could potentially exhibit at Tate Britain at this Late at Tate series of events. So I went along to it and found that all of the other guys were London-based. So I travelled half the distance of the country from Wigan to give this talk, and thankfully they loved it. I kind of hogged the spotlight a little bit because you were only supposed to have 6 minutes, but they were all so enthusiastic about it, and as they were fielding all these questions afterwards, I kind of got the feeling that they wanted to do it regardless of how well my presentation went.
Oh, that's good. And I remember there you had a cube of televisions as well as an installation. Yeah,
absolutely. The wall of televisions is such an attractive thing, and it's funny how many subsequent clients wanted a wall of televisions at their events, because there's something so cool about it, isn't there? Teletext on these multiple screens.
So with your endeavours there at the Tate Britain, did you go on and do any more exhibitions or anything along those lines after that?
Yes, I was invited to go and give a talk in Germany for the Republika Festival, and I dubbed that Block Party 2, borrowing the name from a certain other person who's in this call. Thank you very much, Carl. It's interesting how important you are in these things, because I'm very bad at naming stuff, but we've just chosen your names for our teletext endeavours, Carl, like Block Party, TeletextR, but certainly Block Party I stole from you. Yeah, but Germany in 2016, I think it was, we had a little teletext art workshop, which was really fun, and I got to go along and see a talk about teletext as well, in German, so I understood very little of it, but it was still fun to be there for the Republika Festival thingy-majig.
So when getting closer to home, we hosted some block parties together in Cambridge, and is that when you sort of felt that there was a momentum coming together where there are similar people with their finger in teletext just all suddenly coming together and actually being identified as one subculture?
Yeah, I would say so. Absolutely, because the number of people that turned up for our first block party in Cambridge, now I believe that was also 2016, there was an immense amount of people that came along to the workshop. If you look at some of the photos, I'm surprised how many people we had in that little classroom at the Computing Museum in Cambridge. There were definitely no more seats left. People were standing at the back and fielding questions. Certainly by later in the afternoon, when we had some of the artist talks. The artists panel with Paul Rose and Steve Horsley, a particular highlight for me, that was.
Have you been asked by anybody else, like outside the circle, to provide them any sort of teletext? And any local personalities or anybody like that at all?
Oh, I know where you're leading with this. Local personalities. Yeah, the Lancashire Hot Pots, which are a local folk band from Lancashire, of course. I put together a music video of sorts for them. The song was Lancashire's for Me, and it was sung in the style of Erasure, a very simple 3-chord ditty, but I find myself singing it all the time. But that's testament to the song, I think, because I sat there and edited that music video for a couple of weeks, and I'm still not bored of the song. In fact, I could play it for you right now.
Lancashire's for me, it's the friendliest of counties. Lancashire's for me, there's no place I'd rather be. You make me smile with your red rose, it's really, really great, the nose. Yes, Lancashire's for me.
Did you do anything for any sort of like political figures?
Yeah, absolutely, yes. I don't know how you know that, Carl. Yeah, Count Binface, formerly Lord Buckethead, you might remember him because he ran against Boris Johnson and also Theresa May, I think, in their local constituencies. And he was the guy with a bin on his head. So, more recently, during the lockdown, he asked me to create. Oh, this was fun. He asked me to put together a bamboozle style lockdown quiz. Now, he would write the questions, and I put them together in a little teletext video where people could select the colour according in the old bamboozle fashion. You know, like you would use your remote to select the appropriate colour for the answers. Well, I did it in that style. Oh yeah, that was a lot of fun. And Binface is a wonderful guy because completely off his own back after that, he sent me a crate of beer, which I don't actually drink, but it was a wonderful, wonderful gesture because we all enjoyed that. Oh, he's such a great chap.
Count Binface's dalliance with Teletext is because it's one of his manifesto pledges, isn't it, to bring CFAX back? I think that's how he got sort of tangled up in our web, wasn't it?
Yes, it was on his checklist of things to do, get CFAX back on television. And then he proudly pronounced on Twitter, "Oh, I have got CFAX back on the television." Of course, it was on the last leg with Adam Hills for 1 second, but it was there. His Bin Boozle quiz, it was there on TV, so he delivered on his election promise.
These are huge things for your curriculum vitae, aren't they? So I'm hoping that there's a few more people coming to you for teletext-based art design solutions, Dan.
Oh yeah, lots of people have come to me over the years. One of the first people to do that was Racing UK, TV Text, and they approached me in about 2012. So I did a bunch of graphics for them. And there's a sample of those on my website, but I remember creating a lot more than that down the years, because they would occasionally drop in and say, "Oh, we've got this feature." Like, there was a female jockey, and I did a portrait for her. I'm going to have to put that up as well, aren't I? But yeah, they would occasionally come back to me until at the races teletext ended. I would occasionally have bits and pieces on there, and I think that's possibly my greatest achievement in the world of teletext, because I got it on British teletext.
Looking at the present and the future, have you got any projects on the go at the moment that you can share with us?
Oh, well, we've just finished a project with Yle Teksti TV, YLE Text, in Finland, to celebrate the 41st anniversary of the service. And we had, I think it must have been about 30 artworks by 15 different artists submitted, and I enjoyed creating a few of those. So that's been on my mind recently. Yeah, I just still love doing stuff that's going to be shown on actual broadcast teletext. It's sort of, like I said earlier, it's still one of the biggest motivations for me.
So where can we find all your work, Dan? Is it all online somewhere?
Well, I'm in the process of trying to get more up to date with my portfolio, and I've recently been uploading a selection of my work to DeviantArt. Well, first of all, you can visit danfarrimond.co.uk, and that's my main portfolio.
And you've done a lot of interviews for radio and television, having to contextualise what teletext is to the layperson as well, haven't you?
Yeah, I think I've done, I must have done about half a dozen radio interviews, including a couple of interesting ones for Germany, because they would have to translate what I was saying. So you can just about hear what I'm saying in the background, but there's a translator talking over me, and I hope they weren't saying rude things about me. I'm sure they weren't, but you know, you always you get a bit paranoid that I hope this translator is painting me in a good light.
Do you have any significant projects that you're very proud of?
Well, I think one of my favourite projects was for l'Unique Gallery in France, where I was exhibited alongside a group of international teletext artists. But I had a special video presentation on there, which was actually in the window of well, it's basically a shop front. If you look at the photos, you can see that the l'Unique Gallery, l'unique.info, incidentally, online, it's basically a shop front, and it's got a big projection television in the window. And that's brilliant. That is the way I imagine teletext to be, like I was speaking about earlier, on the multiple televisions, standing in front of a shop like Dixon's and viewing teletext. So I believe in a way that's its native home, in a shop window. And that was a great collaboration, I thought, with Go280, who's a wonderful chiptune artist, and he donated some of his musical works for that. But yeah, I think the significance of that is getting teletext into serious galleries. It's part of the taking teletext seriously and yet not at the same time, because it feels like we're invading something. Teletext is invading the serious stuff. Teletext, which was never this entirely serious format, is actually invading the stuffy world of modern art, yes? And I remember one of my favourite reviews of the Glitch exhibition that I took part in with a load of other people, but it had this rubbish old teletext TV that I set up in there. And I read a review about it that said, well, the exhibition's a bit jarring because you have the clean modernism of these other artworks. And then this rubbish old retro television set that looks very much out of place in a clean white gallery showing this horrible glitched up teletext. And I'm particularly proud of that one, and I'm going to have that on my epitaph, I think. I remember going back to teletext in the 90s. It wouldn't always be plain smooth sailing, because you'd tune in to some awful snow-covered TV program with poor reception and try to work the teletext, but all that came up was this wonderful mishmash of characters, and sometimes words would transform into other words quite hilariously. Like, I don't know what your policy on swearing on this podcast is, Carl.
That's fine.
But you can beep it out if you wish. But my favourite one is from an old CFAX hockey report, where somebody took a great shit instead of a great shot because the TV glitched up on that one particular letter, very unfortunately. So that paints some very vivid pictures in the mind, as teletext can, as only teletext can.
Thank you to Dan Farrimond. You can find Dan Farrimond's work on danfarrimond.co.uk. You have been listening to Teletext People. Teletext People is presented by me, Carl Attrell, and is a Bite High No Limit production. I really enjoyed making this podcast series. However, if you want help with the hosting costs, you can do so by finding the KoFi link in the notes.